Ah, the modern audience. I'm pretty sure you've heard of them before. This mythical group that entertainment companies keep trying to appeal to. Why not we're talking about a demographic with some sort of modern sensibilities that will eat up anything and everything, entertainment-wise, no matter how low quality or full of propaganda it is. The question here is about its existence. Some people will say that this modern audience doesn't exist and never will, because they themselves will not join this modern audience. That's not entirely true, even though they're not lying. They will not be the modern audience, but it is a little bit more complex than that. Others, a little bit wiser or smarter, will tell you that companies are trying to create this modern audience. They are really close to the truth, and they probably understand exactly what's going on, but it's not properly explained. It's not that they're trying to create the modern audience, it's that they have been trying to create this modern audience for many years. This phenomenon can be seen in any piece of entertainment really. Movies, shows, music, comics. However, I'm gonna use as an example video games since I know a little bit about those. From here on, I will try to showcase as best as I can, and I will also try to be brief, the declining quality in video games. I came up with some sort of graph, which, even though it has a bunch of numbers and a bunch of lines, don't take it as anything more than an actual sketch. Even though I call it a sketch, it confirms all of my biases, so obviously it has to be correct, right? So here it is, the graph. Oh, hold up, that's wrong. So, here it is, the graph. Now you might be thinking, okay, what does this mean? Well, I was trying to showcase, as best as I could, the amount of high-quality games per year. Obviously, once again, this is gonna be biased, this is not exhaustive. But I do believe we might be able to agree with the overall sentiment that I'm trying to explain here. So please, bear with me while we take a trip through history. Even though video game history goes back to the 50s, and even the first home console goes back to 1972 with the Magnavox Odyssey, I'm considering the early parts, even the beginning of the NES, as some sort of foundation for the hobby. Sure, I don't consider these games to be bad or anything, but they are the first ones, so it's really difficult to gauge when we don't have anything else to compare them to. So as we can see, the lying up until the early to mid 80s just more or less neutral, because once again I can't really gauge that. And we can see that things are start to ramp up here at this point, more or less in the mid 80s. We have obvious choices for video games like Super Mario Bros., which has been really important for the hobby for a long time. You can also see a steady increase in quality with video games with other really important franchises like The Legend of Zelda and the creation of the JRPG genre with the likes of Dragon Quest in 1986 and Final Fantasy I in 87. I like RPGs, so I'm going to mention them a lot, you have been warned. Even after that, with other genres, we have classics that are still talked about to this day, like Dragon Quest 3, Mega Man 2, or Castlevania 3. Then it came the 90s, and boy, what a decade it was. Technology was evolving quickly, great leaps in quality were experienced, and creativity was at an all-time high. This was a combination gave birth to not only genre-defining titles, but some of the best games ever made, even to this day. We can start mentioning games already in 1990 with Super Mario World for the SNES. We also have the likes of A Link to the Past in 92, Doom and Circuit of Mana in 93, Tekken Final Fantasy VI in 94, Chrono Trigger in 95, Super Mario 64, Tomb Raider, Quake, Resident Evil, and the almighty Pokemon Red and Blue, kickstarting the Pokemania. It's been so long, but those are all really important names that are still talked about to this day. If we keep going forward, we have the likes of Final Fantasy VII, Fallout, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Half-Life, Ocarina of Time, Metal Gear Solid. That is still just the 90s. Surprisingly enough, things don't start to go down just in the 2000s. We still have other classics that have shaped what gaming is today. There I mention Diablo 2, Final Fantasy 9 and 10, Deus Ex, Paper Mario, GTA 3 and Vice City, Warcraft 3, which, being a strange turn of events, will be the grandfather of the MOBA genre, which which I'm not a big fan of, but that's for another time, I'm afraid. So many relevant games, and I understand I'm missing a lot of them, but if I go through every single one, this would take me hours. That's way too much. Things have started to change in the mid to late 2000s. For some reason, we saw some decline in quality, but games were still good in general. The likes of Final Fantasy XII and 13 were divisibly the best and really suspicious. Even then, we still had games, especially on PC. Portal, Bioshock, Mass Effect, Assassin's Creed. The Nintendo DS was also seeing great success with video games. It was not only the Pokémon machine. Even though Pokémon has always been big, they had a huge amount of RPGs, so I was really happy back then. We had Final Fantasy Tactics Advance 2, Golden Sun 3, even though it's not like an actual RPG, it's still a game I like a lot, in Castlevania Order of Ecclesia. These were really good games. If only we knew they would be the last of their kind. And no, I'm not counting the newer Castlevania games because they're completely different. The divisiveness will continue in the 2010s, despite the resounding success stories of games such as Minecraft, GTA 5 or Witcher 3. We also had some really questionable releases. The game might be successful, and maybe because Todd Howard keeps releasing that game every single year. But, and maybe that's just me, I always heard that Oblivion was better than Skyrim. The Elder Scrolls 6 soon, by the way. Diablo 3 and Pokemon X and Y were extremely suspicious. We could see a change direction with the companies, and that was not for the best. Live service games were also on the rise. League of Legends was raking buckets of money, and many clones were exploding from the ground. Hearthstone and Overwatch also saw great success despite their current situations, which are far from great. Speaking of huge success, despite what you might believe, Fortnite is also from the 2010s. Obviously, if you're talking about the 2010s, we had to talk about 2014. It was an especially disastrous year, with the advent of Gamergate. Even to this day, there's a lot of disinformation about the topic, with the conversation usually getting shut down with accusations of isms and phobias. For the purpose of this video, it matters not to me what side of the issue you fall into. But you have to admit, having the likes of Anita Sarkeesian talking to the United Nations about misogyny in video games is not nothing. Clearly, something changed at this point, and it was not great. I still remember the announcement of Battlefield 5, with a strong independent woman, girl bossing through World War II with a prosthetic arm. That was really strange. I also remember the Fallout 76 debacle. People hacking the game and spawning Skyrim dragons to fight? Yeah, that was a thing. Of course, there are other success stories even in the late 2010s. Nier Automata, Dragon Quest XI, Bloodborne. Huh, how curious. Japanese games. And then, the 2020s came. Even though I actually did research on the matter, I was having a lot of trouble coming up with actual good games that released since 2020. And I mean actually good, not just successful in sales. Most games at this point in time are just live service slash gacha games, with probably Genshin Impact as the best example, and a myriad of remakes. There are so many remakes! And sure, of course, those remakes are not that bad, but do we really need to face for games that released originally 20 to 30 years ago, when those newer versions might not even be complete? But if I need to mention high quality games, even though I might not be the target audience, I guess we have Elden Ring, Astrobot, Baldur's Gate 3, maybe Expedition 33. I don't think those games are bad. Are they masterpieces? It's hard for me to tell. And this is mentioning games between 2020 and the current year of 2025. If we go back to the 90s, I have more than 5 games in my list for every single year. And now we're struggling to mention 5 games, 5 actual new games, that are not remakes and that are not live service slash gacha games in the past 5 years. Maybe at this point, you might be asking yourself, what isn't this about the modern audience? Did we really need to go through the past 40 years of video games? Well, yeah, kinda. It is important for me to explain the actual lowering in quality of video games, because that's what gives birth to this modern audience. And I understand I've been a fan of video games for a long time, back when things were still good. But not a lot of people are, and that's how they get you. I've noticed, especially on social media, that you will see people, and maybe they're young people, maybe there are people that got into gaming recently, maybe there are people that don't pay attention. It matters not to me. There are still people. I will tell you. But the new games are not that bad. That was felt really strange to me. But my first video games were from this time. So I've seen the complete evolution of the hobby. So how could they say something like that? Well, let me explain you why. Most people don't look back when they join a hobby. That's not me. I always try to look to the first games when I find something new that I like. But I know that is rare, especially these days. So I have seen in 2 occasions something really important, and that was a huge influx of fans into the hobby. The obvious one would be 2020. Thank you, China, for your T-virus. Everybody was at home, so what are you going to do? Well, I don't know. How about playing video games? And I've also seen people joining at some point in the early 2010s, which is not something I see a lot of people talk about. It's gonna be another topic for another day, but this is related to companies trying to sell you gaming as a lifestyle, as a brand, as a fashion. So now you might be thinking, why does this matter? Well, let me tell you. This matters a lot, because when you have people joining in the early 2010s or in 2020, they're gonna compare games to what they had during those times, because that's what they know. So, most people will only know about this, or even worse, about this. So of course, so you might talk to somebody that got into the hobby recently, and they will tell you, oh, but this game is not too bad. And the game might be around here, let's say. And you're like, yeah, that's not too bad, but why can't it be this good anymore? Right? And this is, my friends, how the modern audience exists. It's not a mythical creature. The modern audience already exists. Somewhat, because of course, if I've experienced this, I understand that this is a decline. But people that doesn't have my experience and got into the hobby here with the biggest decline might see decline as normal, but clearly that's not the case. Once again, we can trace back this phenomenon to every single piece of entertainment. Sure, you will need to move years around, but you can see in obvious decline in quality. Of course, somebody like me is never going to be important to the modern audience, but that's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to push the likes of me, and maybe the likes of you, away from the hobby, because we're not really profitable, because we will not eat whatever's love, even though that's an overused word, our ways. And this modern audience is actually really useful for the companies, because they can keep pushing for the worst practices in the industry without no real pushback from newer hobbyists. Have you seen the huge amount of microtransactions nowadays? And do I even need to mention the pushback against the stop killing games? That's really obvious. Back in the day, you bought the game and that was it. Nowadays, you have to buy a bunch of accessories and pray to your gods of choice, just so that the game doesn't die in less than 5 years. Sadly, it's usually an average of 2, so good luck with that. I also understand that this is mainly a AAA problem with the big companies. A lot of people say, ah, screw AAA, AA and indies are the best. And, well yeah, they're usually better, or they can be better, at least. But I'm not talking this issue from just a customer point of view. I'm talking about the sore state of the business in general, the hobby. AAA will always be relevant as they are the biggest and most well-known titles. They represent the hobby large. You cannot tell me it makes sense to be disappointed with every single release from the likes of Square Enix, when we were singing poems to their greatness in the 90s. It's not normal. How it's going to end? I have no idea. The drop in quality might continue forever until it breaks, or it might plateau a little bit at some point. Some are waiting for an extinction level collapse that may let the hobby heal and become great again. But this is not video games. It's never just video games. I know I mentioned movies, TV shows and the likes before, but this is also happening to TTRPGs, when there's nothing more customizable than TTRPGs, which is really strange to me. I guess I agree with voting with your wallet as the bare minimum. You can also push people to play other titles. If you like Final Fantasy, Zelda, or Pokemon, oh boy, You should play all the titles. They might be pretty good. But at the end of the day, I don't really have a definitive solution. I'm just a guy after all. Aside from the collapse of the industry, of course. You best start believing in cultural collapse stories, Mr. Viewer. You are in one.